Today the city of Westminster in London is synonymous with power. When we think of Westminster, some of the most famous landmarks in the world spring to mind. Big Ben, the Mother of Parliaments, and Westminster Abbey. The city of Westminster is also synonymous with one of the most famous documents in the Protestant faith, the Westminster Standards, which include the Westminster Confession of Faith, the larger and the shorter catechisms. Throughout the world, Presbyterian denominations hold these documents as doctrinal definitions of their faith. Ministers and elders must subscribe to their teachings, and the Shorter Catechism forms part of their Sunday school curriculum. Why then did Westminster, the seat of government in the UK, become associated with an important Protestant Reformation document? Here's another puzzle. Why do the Westminster Standards have more in common with Scottish Presbyterians than English Protestants, but yet they are named after the traditional heart of English government? The answer to these questions lies in the turbulent history that surrounded the emergence of these documents. Since the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, the Church of England was divided. On the one hand, there were the Anglicans, who preferred rule by bishops and archbishops, and the Puritans, who believed that the Church of England was not Protestant enough. In 1603, James VI of Scotland was crowned as James I of England. He neither liked the Puritans of England or the Presbyterians of Scotland. In truth, he preferred a church that was more Catholic than Protestant, but he was a good politician who managed the divisions within his kingdoms. His son Charles I was a different proposition. He believed that he had the divine right to do as he wished, and he was determined to control the churches in his kingdoms. Politically, he acted without Parliament, and as a consequence his reign became resented. Things came to a head when he appointed William Laud as Archbishop of Canterbury. Theologically, Laud wanted to reverse the Reformation in England, Wales and Ireland. He wanted the churches in the British Isles to be uniform, to be more Catholic than Protestant, and so he tried to bring the Church of Scotland under the authority of Canterbury. Scotland resisted this, and hundreds of thousands signed the National Covenant in 1638. Charles went to war against the Scots to enforce Laud's policy, and he was defeated. He was forced to call a parliament to pay for this war, but Parliament refused to approve. From this moment, Parliament began to enact policies which were in opposition to the king. This began a process which would lead to a bloody civil war, the execution of Laud and King Charles himself, and establish the only republic in the history of England and Scotland under Oliver Cromwell. In 1643, Parliament called an assembly to meet in the chapel of King Henry VII in Westminster Abbey. These men were tasked with the remit to settle the religious questions that had so divided the nation. While the country was in upheaval, as the sounds of cannon fire drew closer, as the king waged war with his subjects, and as his subjects waged war with him, these men drew up the most comprehensive set of doctrinal statements that the English language had ever seen. They consisted of the brightest ministers and theologians of Puritan England. These men had faced persecution from their king because of their conscientious objection to his policies. They were strengthened by 4 commissioners from the Church of Scotland, whose influence was considerable. These included Samuel Rutherford of Anwoth and George Gillespie, one of the youngest commissioners. As well as the Confession of Faith, they used the question and answer style to provide a system of methodically instructing people, especially young people. These were known as the larger and shorter catechisms. They underestimated the shorter catechism in introducing it for those of weaker capacity. In truth, anyone that can grasp this comprehensive manual grasps all the major and essential truths that are necessary. It was this manual, composed in days of national upheaval, that we shall consider during the course of these studies. The Scriptures talk about faith as being not only an activity of the soul, but about being a noun as well. The faith is a form of teaching that defines what we believe. Therefore, as we think about the teaching of the Shorter Catechism, we are thinking about the faith, what we believe. In Jude chapter 1 verse 3 we read, "Beloved, when I gave all diligence to write unto you of the common salvation, it was needful for me to write unto you, and exhort you, that ye should earnestly contend for the faith that was once delivered unto the saints." By knowing these definitions of the faith, we are equipped to serve God. We will be kept biblical in our thinking. Our thoughts will be guarded, and our minds will be taught. Let us thank God for the teachings of the Shorter Catechism as we work our way through these studies.